Hey guys, and in today's video, this is part 2 of my mini series where I go through every year in UFC history and I say should have been Fighter of the Year and who I think should have won Fighter of the Year. And in today's video, we're going through the years 2004 to 2013. And yes, I made a mistake in the title. Just so you know, 2003 winner is Randy Couture. I spoke about that in part 1. But anyway, the way I'll decide this is I'll look at every fighter throughout said year, see how many wins they had, the competition they were fighting when they got these wins, the way these guys won their fights, and the accomplishments they had throughout the general year. Also, when we get to 2008, I will be directly comparing the World MMA Awards and who they picked for Fighter of the Year versus who I picked for Fighter of the Year, and I will vouch for why I think my guy should have won. Or I'll say, why I agree with World MMA Awards. Anyway, starting off with the year, we have a few names to mention, starting off with Chuck Liddell. Liddell rebounded from his loss in 2003 to Couture by knocking out Tito Ortiz and Vernon Wright. The Ortiz win was significant, because at the time, this was the biggest rivalry that the UFC had ever saw, in the sense of the two fighters skill-wise who were fighting each other, and how much the fans cared about this fight. If you want a comparison to this fight, this was the 2000s version of Masvidal versus Kobe, friends to enemies. Also this year, Randy Couture would defend his title against Vitor Belfort, and GSP would debut, starting its rise up to the welterweight division. Now, why Chuck didn't fight for the title or win the championship, I personally think he's the 2004 Fighter of the Year, because I think Prime Tito Ortiz is a better win than Vitor Belfort in 2004, and also he had another win where Randy just had one, and GSP was just at the start of his career, low down at this moment in time, was getting some good wins, but still, for me, your 2004 Fighter of the Year is Chuck Liddell. Now for 2005, I think we have a much clearer year. First name I want to go over is Chuck Liddell. In 2005, Liddell's star power exploded. He knocked out Couture to win the light heavyweight title and defended it against Jeremy Horn. At this point, Couture's markability was nothing like we saw before in the UFC. He was the face of the UFC by far, the biggest star that the UFC had up to this date. He was the face of the UFC, he was the UFC, he was the brand of the UFC. Second, we have GSP, who got some good wins against Frank Trigg, who was a very good contender, and Sean Sherk, future champ, so a great year by GSP. And Randy obviously lost to Liddell, but he would get a win at heavyweight later in the year. But for me, this is a clear Chuck Liddell year, okay? From the fights that he won to outside the octagon, just becoming a star, okay? So my 2005 Fighter of the Year is Chuck the Iceman Liddell. Now for 2006, we have another incredibly competitive year like 2004. So first name I want to go over is Chuck Liddell once again. Okay, he defended his title twice, knocking out Couture in their trilogy and KOing Renato Sobral. So a great year for Chuck. Then we had the insane rise of Anderson Silva, who debuted this year, knocking out Chris Lieben, and then destroyed Rich Franklin to win the UFC middleweight title. Yes, he became champion in the same year he debuted. Then the last name to go over is GSP, who would avenge his earlier loss in his career to Matt Hughes by defeating him for the UFC welterweight title, and he also beat BJ Penn this year, which is another S tier win. Now for me, it's between Anderson because of his insane rise and GSP by defeating Matt Hughes and BJ Penn. Really, I think you could go either way with this, but I'm personally going to pick George. I am going to pick George. Before I got confused there for a second, I did not. I'm going to pick George. Defeating Matt Hughes, defeating BJ Penn, I think those are better wins than Chris Lieben and Rich Franklin, because Matt Hughes was a much more dominant champ than Rich Franklin. So my 2006 Fighter of the Year is George Rush St. Pierre. Now for 2007, we have 3 names to go over. First is GSP, who would lose to Matt Serra this year, but he did rebound by defeating Josh Koscheck, top contender, and also defeating Matt Hughes to get the interim welterweight title. But for me, losing to Matt Serra in the biggest upset in UFC history, a guy who GSP should never be losing to, totally gets rid of GSP in discussion for Fighter of the Year. So the two guys we got left are Anderson and Rampage Jackson. Starting off with Anderson, who defended his title twice, dominant win over Nate Marquardt and Rich Franklin. And then we got Rampage, who would end the reign of Chuck Liddell, and he would also unify the UFC and Pride belts by defeating Dan Henderson. Now for me, beating Dan Henderson and Chuck Liddell are much superior wins than Rich Franklin and Nate Marquardt. So for me, I'm going to give Fighter of the Year 2007 to Rampage Jackson. Now for 2008, we have a very competitive year between GSP, Anderson Silva and BJ Penn. And first of all, we have BJ Penn, who defeat Joe Stevenson to win the lightweight title, and he'd also defeat Sean Sherk. Then we have Anderson, who defended his middleweight title 3 times, including wins over Dan Henderson and Patrick Cote. Then with GSP, he defeated Matt Serra to reclaim the welterweight title, and he defended it against John Fitch. Now for me, it's between Anderson and GSP. I think Anderson has the best win out of the two of them, and I think Dan Henderson's a better win than Matt Serra and John Fitch, but I think Matt Serra and John Fitch are better wins than Patrick Cote. But just due to Anderson having one more win throughout the year, I slightly edge it towards Anderson. Now the World MMA Awards also had it for Anderson this year, so I agree with them. I ain't got no quarrel with them, you know what I'm saying? So for me, Anderson Silva is your 2008 UFC Fighter of the Year. Now for 2009 Fighter of the Year, we have the 3 same names to go over. BJ Penn this year would defend his lightweight title twice, getting a decent win against Diego Sanchez. 2009, Diego Sanchez is a great win to get. Then with GSP, he defended his title twice against BJ Penn and Thiago Alves. And then with Silva, he would defend his middleweight title twice, and he'd also venture up a division against Forrest Griffin. Now, I do definitely think BJ Penn should be disqualified considering he lost to GSP, and I think GSP has the best win this year, which is BJ Penn. But I think Anderson having the best performance of his entire career, where he literally entered the Matrix against Forrest Griffin, absolutely dominated him. It was embarrassing for Forrest Griffin, and considering who Forrest Griffin is, you know, former champion, considering it wasn't even Anderson's division. Come on. And also he had another win this year over GSP. No, I'm not saying he beat GSP. Saying he had an extra win this year. He had 3 wins, GSP had 2. So I'm going to have to give this one to Anderson Silva, who dismantled Forrest Griffin and got another 2 title defenses to his name. Now for 2010, we have another name to add to the top 3 in Cain Velasquez, who would knock out Brock Lesnar to win the UFC heavyweight title. Now going back to the old 2 regulars who have been here for quite a while now, we got GSP, who would defend his title against Dan Hardy and Josh Koscheck. Dan Hardy, he would completely dominate. Josh Koscheck, he also dominated as well. And then we have Anderson, who defended his middleweight title against Charles Sonnen in a legendary comeback. And also, that's our Vitor Belfort. Now I think Vitor Belfort is the best win between Anderson and GSP. And just considering how the not Chuck Liddell, you fucking idiot. Fuck, okay. Anyway, I'm trying to be like professional. Not professional, you know what I mean? I'm trying to sound, what's it called? I ain't trying to fucking speak like an idiot, but you know, anyway. Just considering how he beat Charles Sonnen in the most legendary comeback in UFC history, I think that's something to consider as well. So for me, a 2010 Fighter of the Year is once again Anderson the Spider Silva. Now for 2011, we have the most star-studded year yet. We have, that's not true. I wrote this down, that's not true, that's the next year. My bad. Anyway, we have John Jones, who had a historic year, winning the light heavyweight title by defeating Shogun and defending it against Rampage and Lyoto Machida. He's not really the youngest, it's still say how the WEC counts, just saying. But also, we have Anderson this year, who defended his title with a stunning front kick KO of Vitor Belfort and a win over Yushi Okami. And then JDS also won the heavyweight title. Now, John Jones was given the World MMA Awards Fighter of the Year, and I'm inclined to agree. I think John Jones is Fighter of the Year, just considering how young he was, how he beat 3 legends. Okay, for me, John Jones is very clearly your 2011 Fighter of the Year. Now for 2012, this was the star-studded year that I was talking about before. We got John Jones, Anderson Silva, and George St. Pierre all in contention for fight of the year. Starting off with Anderson, who defended his title twice by defeating Chael Sonnen in their highly anticipated rematch, which he put a stamp on that rivalry, winning in the second by TKO. Then GSP returned from his injury to defeat Carlos Condit and unify the welterweight title, as Carlos Condit was the, I forgot the word, I'm fucking stupid, interim. There you go. Intelligent. But yeah, and then we got John, who defeated Rashad and Vito this year. Now for me, John obviously having more fights, and in my opinion beating the best guy out of any of these in Rashad, and also having Vito Belfort, who's better than any other guys. I think this is another clear John Jones fighter of the year, because John Jones is the pound for pound #1 fighter. If you disagree, you're a fucking idiot. Okay, you're a fucking idiot. I'm gay for John Jones. Sorry, my bad, Dana. Fucking prick. Anyway, 2013 fighter of the year. You ain't gonna like this, okay? But for me, it's Ronda Rousey. Okay, when I was making this and I was looking at it, I was surprised as well by the conclusion that I came to. But she was the first ever UFC Women's Champion, and she defended it twice. And then the other guys I had in contention was Chris Weidman, who obviously defeated Anderson first one, fair enough, but the second fight was a freak accident. And then we got John, who defeated Chow, who was a middleweight coming off the couch. And also Gus in one of the greatest fights of all time, yes, but I mean, there's an argument that Gus won that fight. And when you put those asterisks onto big vocabulary, when you put that onto Chris's and John's year, you know, they don't quite look as good. So for me, Ronda Rousey is your 2013 fighter of the year. Now that's it for this decade kind of space of time. In the next one, I'm going to be doing 2014 to 2024. You know, we're going to have names like Kamaru Usman, Volkanovski, Conor McGregor up in there. I imagine. I've actually not gone through it yet and decided. But yeah, like, subscribe, do all that. I'll see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your day in a bit.